prep to get into the mind and the experience of McQuaid. So you'll forgive me if it's a little bit disjointed, but here we go. So, you know, I was born in Coote Hill in County Cavan, right at the border, really. And I had an interesting childhood, a rather happy childhood in many senses, I guess. My father was an esteemed medical doctor of high standing, and my mother was had an artistic and an intellectual background, and she had experience of being in the United States and was very invested in the arts. Shortly after my birth, we were gifted with 5 more siblings, and my father adopted 2 of our cousins on account of their mother dying. So it was a busy house. I was a studious child. I preferred books to the outdoors, and quickly established myself as a bright little boy. My primary school teacher predicted great things for me, and I was sent to the local, the best school in the area, let's say St. Patrick's. But that was a pretty brutal place, and my health began to suffer on account of the brutality. And eventually my mother took me out, and my father saw fit to send me to the Holy Ghost Fathers in Blackrock in County Dublin. And I have to say, it was an extraordinary thing to walk into this environment where learning was at the center, but also a very wholesome Catholic devotion. And I quickly fell under the, my father described it as wicked influence of a brother Gaspard from France, who was convinced that my destiny was to be the greatest priest of all, who would defend the faith. My father was so horrified by this prediction that he quickly removed me from Blackrock College against my wishes, and I was dispatched to Clongowes, where the Jesuits did their level best to form my conscience and inform my my intellectual, how would you say, my intellectual endeavors. At that time, my best friend was one Hugo, who was from Belfast. And around that time, I learned that my mother wasn't in fact my birth mother, that my mother, who had given birth to me, had died from puerperal fever a week after my birth. It didn't sit well with me. It didn't sit well with me at all. I had some level of, I think, a crisis of confidence in my mother and father's truthfulness. And as a result, I decided that summer, they did agree to it all right, that I could spend the summer with Hugo in Belfast and with his family up north. And that was in 1912. Actually, we were there when a bit of a kerfuffle broke out, and all of a sudden 3,000 Catholics were expelled from Harland and Wolff. So things were really kicking off up there. Of course, being from Coote Hill, I was aware of all of the ins and outs and the pros and the cons and what to say and when to keep my peace. But it was a worrying development for sure. Back in Dublin, we had the lockout, and I witnessed Jim Larkin's capacity to organize people and incite them to maybe act against their better interests. But the one horrifying thing in that time was the proposal to send all the children who were suffering from the effects of the lockout to England for a holiday. goodness gracious, what did they expect was going to happen to those poor souls? Starving little children going over there, hanging out with heathens and subject to all kinds of undue influences. So obviously, myself and other people who are interested in defending the faith quickly raised some money and rescued the poor children before they were put on the boats. Now, in 1913, I decided I really did want to become a Spiritan, a Holy Ghost father. And I remembered my conversations with Brother Gaspard, and I really wanted to plant the faith, right? I wanted to bring the news of our Mother Mary and Christ to the Africans. That was my desire. I wanted to join the Holy Ghost Fathers as I was about to become 18. Now, my father was vehemently opposed to this, but my dear mother, Agnes, spoke to him as only she could, and eventually he dropped his opposition and accepted my wishes to join the Holy Ghost Fathers, and I was professed or accepted into the seminary. Now, at that time, my ambition was to become a to carry the light of Christ to Africa and beyond, to wherever Christ's light was needed. Things turned out a bit differently. I was quickly brought back to, after my studies in University College Dublin, where I was, I'd won the medals for classics, for languages, and so on and so forth. Blackrock College wanted me to come in as an administrator and as a headmaster. And I did my best, and I really enjoyed my time there. I did everything I could to raise the profile of the college, to become a shining light for Catholicism, to develop an environment that reminded the boys of the glory of the church, of the beneficence of our Mother Mary. We formed all kinds of great societies, including a kind of a sodality where the boys were taught to teach the faith. In fact, one of my favorite adoptees of our faith was the great Evie Hone. I had invited her to come and design a few of the stained pieces for our chapel. And Evie was a really, really keen follower of the catechism, and we had incredibly interesting, strong conversations. I also formed a kind of a friendship, I suppose it has to be said, a kind of a friendship with Jim Larkin. He was wary of the Catholicism part, but he was quite up for the social justice and for relieving the worst aspects of poverty. And so I carried on. I ploughed my lonely furrow, still hoping for Africa, for a life of an exotic faith building. Things went on, and over time it became apparent that my capacity for organization and my ability to hold a lot of information, how would you say it, without revealing my hand, put me in a position of being, I would say, somebody who was be consulted on all aspects of national importance. So much so that when it came to the writing of our Bunlach na Hare and our constitution, the Irish government, De Valera, was quite keen to find out what the Catholic Church thought, what the prelates and the bishops thought, and he did consult with us. And I was very strong. I have to say that the one true and only faith is central to Ireland and to being Irish. He wasn't that keen. He watered it down quite a lot. we did have a bit of a tete-a-tete and to and fro and all the rest, but in the end, they adopted less forceful language, let us say. But the position of the woman, protecting women as the keepers of the faith and keepers of the home, and many other aspects of the Constitution, I think, were favorably influenced by our input. Now, around that time, sorry, a little bit before, I got to know the De Valeras very well on account of their son Vivian studying in Blackrock College. The poor lad was quite ill. He was actually studying in UCD, but he came out to Blackrock for his health. He had terribly bad asthma, and he fell quite ill around Christmas time. And his mother and father, Eamon and his mother, beautiful mother Sheila, spent quite a lot of time at Blackrock as guests of myself, of course. And I grew quite fond of them all, especially Vivian. And I think in many ways, Eamon De Valera's schoolboy career as a Spiritan and our subsequent relationship was really a good partnership. I felt I was able to help him in all kinds of diplomatic and social matters, and he deferred to me in terms of education. In fact, when it came to the 30s, and Ireland really needed to develop its educational outlook and its infrastructure from university down to primary school, he realized that he needed a strong visionary and an administrator and somebody who was who had the ear of everyone in the church. And of course, it was the Catholic Church who was the builder of schools, the manager of schools. We set the ethos. We funded quite a lot of the aspects of education. We helped with the formation of the children. And this we felt was primarily the work of the church, to turn out faithful, well-founded young people for Ireland's future. So De Valera had me work with the new government. I can't remember exactly what it was, Clon McGael. There was a time when De Valera became Taoiseach, and he took over the portfolio of Minister of Education, which he pretty much handed over to me. Now, another thing happened in around that time. No, it was when I was given the archbishopric, which actually was kind of a surprise, but not a surprise, because normally those things are kept for the diocesan priests. But in this case, there had been such a lag between the older archbishop passing away, who wasn't really that effective, that all kinds of little fiefdoms had emerged among the different diocesan priests. And in fact, in the end, Rome decided they needed to go outside the diocesan, and they came to a Spiritan, to a Holy Ghost Father, me. So I wrote the first letter I wrote when I heard the news from Rome was to my mother Agnes. And I gladly accepted the role as Archbishop. De Valera was delighted. I think he was definitely instrumental in having the ear of the Papal Nuncio. When I became Archbishop, I immediately set about putting out a very detailed plan for all the needs of Irish Catholics, from education, through health, through even in the prisons, in reform, you name it. We had come up with a plan that the best of the best would be available as best we could within the framework of where we were. Now, in the 1940s, obviously, in Britain, after the war, after the emergency, things had fallen apart a bit. And in the north of Ireland, they got the national health system. And Dublin were keen to follow suit. In fact, it was Noel Brown who developed the idea for the mother and child scheme, whereby doctors would give free medical treatment to mothers and their children. And of course, we couldn't have this. We couldn't have doctors in charge of arbitrarily giving women, how would you say that? Well, advice on intimate matters. I mean, already there was quite a lot of talk about preventing pregnancy, and God knows that our mother Mary needed Irish women to have their children. We needed the children. So, and the doctors weren't too pleased either. So I and the priests and the bishops in Ireland, we put a very strong case against Dr. Noel Brown's concept for what we thought was socialism by stealth, you know, some kind of how, you know, certainly non-religious approach to the health of women and children. Now, Noel resigned. He felt he had to resign. And that little piece of kerfuffle passed reasonably easily enough. And I kept doing, I did my level best for Dublin, for Ireland. I genuinely care for every single human soul. Possibly a little bit more for Catholics. I have been accused of being an anti-Semite. I've been accused of all kinds of things. And I think at the end of the day, truth will out. I've recorded every single piece of correspondence, every sermon, every diktat, every plan. And I have very good handwriting. So I'm hopeful that in the decades and even in the centuries to come, Ireland will know that I had her best interest at heart, and that my beating heart was one of charity and love. People say I had a big, strong impact on Dev. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. It was based on mutual respect and love of common values, and a vision for a Gaelic Ireland that was Catholic at its core. So thank you.